All right, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. This is the June 21st meeting of the Educational Professional Standards Board's Waiver Committee. I'm joined this morning by fellow committee members, Kathy Gunn and Tracy Hunt. We have 7 waivers to review and formulate a recommendation to present to the full board. Starting with waiver A, will be presented by Kathy Jacobs.
Jackson, but
Sorry, Jackson.
She knows me well. Waiver A is from 6 of the EPPs, and it is requesting that a portion of the 200 clock hours of field experience be waived due to district closures from the pandemic. Most of the EPPs have figured out ways around this, and these are just portions, and attached to your meeting minutes, we have the request from each one. So the universities are Alice Lloyd College, Georgetown College, Kentucky State University, Northern Kentucky, Union College, and the University of the Cumberlands.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. So you have the waiver A. Do we have a motion? We'll take motions and then questions after we have a motion.
So when we do a motion, this is my first rodeo on this committee. Is it the same as EPSB? I need to say, I make a motion to request to waive field experience.
Waiver A.
Okay, got it. So I will make a motion to approve waiver A to waive field experience.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Do we have a second?
Kathy Gunn, I second the motion.
Thank you, Kathy. Any questions for Kathy? All right, hearing none, if you approve the motion to request to waive field experience clock hours due to district closures, waiver A, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. All right. Waiver B, Kathy?
Waiver B is from Morehead State University. They have a K through 12 art major, Kaylee Thornsberry, and the regulation states that if she's a K through 12, that they have to have half of their placement in elementary and the other half in middle or high school. There are reasons that the county, I think it's Rowan County, yes, did not want the teachers in the elementary schools due to they would be seeing every single student rather than just the people that are taking art. So the university is asking for us to waive that regulation for the elementary, and they're going to place them in a middle and a high school setting for this fall. So rather than just doing one high school or one middle, they're going to do one of each.
Which we've had a lot of these requests.
We've had a lot of these requests. And we have another one.
So I need a motion.
I make a motion that we approve waiver B and exclude the elementary schools.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Any questions for Kathy or discussion? All right, if you approve waiver B, alternative student teaching placement request for Kaylee Thornsberry, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, no. All right, waiver B is approved. Okay, waiver C. And Kathy, you're up again.
Waiver C is the exact same thing, but the student is Virginia Vance. She is also a K through 12 art major. Rowan County cannot place her or does not want to place her in an elementary school. So they will place her in a middle and a high school placement this fall. So they are asking for a waiver of that.
Okay. We have a motion.
I make a motion to approve waiver C.
I second the motion.
All right, any questions for Kathy or discussion? All right, if you approve the motion to approve waiver C, alternative student teaching placement request for Virginia Vance, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, no. All right. Waiver D. And I think that's Margaret Hawkinsmith.
Yes, okay. Western Kentucky University has submitted a waiver of 16 KAR 3090 as it relates to the admission to an Ed Leadership Principal Program for Miss Michelle Klein. One of the admissions requirements outlined in the regulation is the requirement of 3 years of teaching experience. Additionally, one of the requirements for the issuance of a statement of eligibility for school principal is 3 years of full-time teaching experience. Currently, Ms. Klein holds a certificate as a school psychologist, but does not hold a teaching certificate. Western Kentucky outlined in their waiver request Ms. Klein's experience as a dean of students at Christ the King Parochial School, and experience as a school psychologist, a gifted coordinator in the private schools, a district data analysis coordinator, and over 20 years of experience working in the schools. And you have in your documentation any other details about her experience and so forth.
And Margaret, can you remind us when these have come to us in the past, what action has been?
I believe there was one that Cassie informed me about from last fall or spring.
Hey, Sherry, and I'll kind of assist a little bit with that. I know this is Margaret's first time actually being in with the waiver committee. In August of 2019, the board had a somewhat similar waiver request involving a school psychologist seeking admission to the program. However, that individual had much less experience than this one, so you are able to differentiate the two through that. But in that case, the board did deny the waiver request. Now, we have seen a few on the certification side, which you are going to see one of those with Crystal today as well. So she may be able to speak a little bit about the certification side of that too. The board has really had strong feelings about instructional experience, that these people who are going to be principals have some instructional experience, that they are able to show that. Now, you have approved, the same time as the waiver that was denied for admission, there was one for certification that was also denied at that meeting involving a school social worker, but they were able to come back and show that they had extensive experience in instruction, and they provided that experience to you, and that was in fact approved. This individual has shown you some instructional experience. Western Kentucky has provided a little bit more detailed background for them. So that is to say, you do have cases where it has been denied for admission because they were not able to show instructional experience. However, you also have on the certification side with these waivers that if they showed instructional experience that you were comfortable with, that you felt met the requirements of the statute of 3 years of teaching experience and a teaching certificate, then you had approved.
Thank you, Cassie.
You're welcome.
So we need a
question. Well, I have a question.
Go ahead, Cassie.
I'm gonna be very candid. My father-in-law didn't want me to go home yesterday, so I didn't get to look over things like I planned. So if you could give me a little more background about this particular person's instructional experience, because that is actually my concern, because it is extremely different being in a classroom with 20 to 30 students than doing administration. But if you're going to do administration over teachers, you need to understand what that feels like.
Okay, in the waiver application and letter of support from Western, I'll just read it. Her path to school administration occurred in an alternative yet parallel pathway to that of a traditional candidate. Although she does not have 3 years of teaching experience as a classroom teacher, Her experiences as a school psychologist, gifted coordinator, and district MTSS data analysis coordinator provided the unique opportunity to work with teachers and principals for assisting with effective practices, problem solving, and using data to make informed decisions about instruction for school improvement. Her work with teachers and principals in the various roles provided a broad and deep understanding for improving instruction within the schools. She spent 4 years as dean of students in an accredited parochial school and facilitated the process for blue ribbon status. Her role in the parochial school required her to use her development and gifted education to teach middle school gifted curriculum.
So she taught middle school gifted curriculum, or she just had the ability to do it?
Well, I mean, she only holds a certificate as a school psychologist. So this is a private school setting. So I don't, it just says, I know it says that she was a coordinator, a gifted coordinator, and her role in the parochial school required her to use her development in gifted education to teach middle school gifted curriculum.
Was she teaching the curriculum to students, or was she teaching what she got out of books to adults? Because it's different. Do we know?
This is hard for me. I'm a sitting 612 principal. So I think that while I feel like there's a lot of things that can be, well, I think almost everything you do is kind of taught on the job. You know what I mean? Like, I think that you acclimate, you do things like that, but I worry about the shift in leadership and the focus in instruction. And I think about how much time I spend as a building level principal with folks that maybe don't have as much background as the others in instruction, and kind of trying to balance that. I think that she has the behavior side, it seems, on point. If she's working with school psychology, she's probably, you know, mental health and trauma and all those things, which very much go hand in hand, right, with the whole experience. But I think that it's difficult for a teacher to have buy-in with an administrator if they've not been in a classroom.
And I totally agree. And just, you know, from my background, I'm school certified social worker, and I'm also a classroom teacher. So I've seen both sides, and it's different. It's extremely different working with small group, one-on-one children with behavior issues, and trying to, affect change with those students in their behavior, versus trying to manage an entire classroom of diverse students who are in different places, behaviorally, academically, and all of that, and trying to support a teacher in doing that in a way that the teacher receives.
Well, I can speak as a elementary school teacher, as well as in higher ed, seeing candidates that come through these programs. And I would always opt to be under the supervision of a principal that has classroom instruction in the P12 setting. Do we have a motion, or do you feel like you need more information?
I would love to know. I mean, is there any way I know sometimes we send out for more information and make a decision later. I would love to know if that curriculum instruction was with students in a classroom setting or with adults who were managing students in a classroom setting. I would love to know, because I mean, if she has that experience, great.
Kathy, Cassie, I think in the past on things like this, have we like denied, but then it's been shared what the concerns were, and the individual can come back with additional information?
So yes, we have done a denial before. Actually, the certification example that I was mentioning, that one was originally denied, and that individual came back and really showed you specifics of her experience in curriculum. You could also defer consideration for additional documentation. One thing I will note on this one, Western, and I believe Margaret, correct me if I'm wrong, they are ready to admit her and get her certified through the proficiency evaluation. So they have vouched for her. However, this is ultimately your decision. And if you want that additional documentation, you could either defer consideration and we can request that from her. Margaret can follow up with Western Kentucky, or you could deny and she could come back to you at the August meeting. Both are valid options.
Okay, I personally lean towards defer for additional information. And I understand why Western would want to admit her. I firmly believe she can do all the academic work and do it excellently and matriculate through their system perfectly. So if I were Western, I'd admit her as well.
So
but I'm trying to look at the other end when she gets out, what's going to happen in the classroom, what's going to happen with teachers, what's going to happen in that school building.
And if that is the recommendation that you make and the board approves that recommendation for deferral, what will happen is Margaret will follow up with Western Kentucky and it will be their responsibility to get you that additional documentation.
Okay. So
I make a motion that we defer for additional information.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I second that.
All right. So the motion on the floor is to defer for additional information and documentation for waiver D, request to waive admission and certification requirements for principal certification for Michelle Klein. Any further discussion or questions? All right, if you approve waiver, the motion for waiver D, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. All right. All right, waiver E. Alan Cassie's not here, is she? Okay. Crystal, I think this one's with you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so waiver E is technically a waiver of two regulations. This one is for Nicholas Warren. Somewhat similar to the waiver you all just heard. It's this gentleman has been a school counselor for 12 years, I believe. And now his is not for admission into a principal program. He actually completed a principal program in the state of Ohio. He finished it at Xavier University. So he's actually seeking principal certification. However, he does not hold a teaching certificate. And he's provided documentation of his classroom instructional experience in his role as a counselor to meet the requirements of principal. So the two waivers you're looking at on this one is of 3090, which is accepting his experience, classroom instructional experience as a school counselor to meet the requirements of principal, as well as 4030, which when he completed his program at Xavier in, I believe, 2012, he did not obtain the equivalent principal certification in the state of Ohio because he was employed in Grant County and Crittenden, Mount Zion Elementary in Grant County. So with Mr. Warren's waiver, he has provided extensive documentation of his teaching experience in his role as school counselor. For instance, there is a letter from his principal at Mount Zion Elementary that documents how many times per month he would go into the classroom in a kindergarten classroom, first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade, as well as his lessons that he taught in the classroom at the middle school level. So he has 10 years of monthly classroom instruction lessons, as well as documentation of those lesson plans that he taught. And then he has 3 years of documentation provided with the, I believe with the middle school. Actually, no, sorry, I'm looking here at this letter. Let Me Run, the boys running program. Also K-Prep test administration. This is just some of the extra documentation he provided, but there was extensive documentation of his classroom experience that he provided. And like I mentioned, this is not for admission into a program. He already has a program completed. Ohio does not have the same requirement that Kentucky does, that requires that they have a teaching certification and teaching experience on that certificate in order to be admitted to a principal program. Do you all have any questions?
I make a motion that we approve waiver E.
I second that.
Okay. All right, any further discussion, questions? All right, if you approve the motion to approve waiver E, the request to waive certification requirements for principal certification for Nick Warren, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, no. All right, and the motion carries. Waiver F.
Waiver F is for Miss Katrina Kennedy. You're going to see a few of these. These are waiver requests of 16 KAR 6010 to waive the 5-year test recency requirement on their praxis test. Miss Kennedy applied for the 1-year COVID testing extension certificate that the EPSB approved for the 2021 school year. She had only been lacking one of her elementary praxis tests, the elementary math test. She ended up passing that test in August of 2020, thinking that, okay, now that's the last test I needed. When she contacted our office, she found out that the other 3 sections in her PLT test score had expired. So those had expired, some in 2019 and some in 2020. So she is requesting a waiver of the 5-year test recency.
I make a motion to approve waiver F.
Okay.
I second the motion.
All right, any further discussion? All right, if you approve waiver F, request to waive 5-year test recency requirement for Katrina Kennedy, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. All right. Waiver G.
Waiver G is requested by Western Kentucky University on behalf of Miss Stephanie Miller. She had completed a dual cert middle school education program, and at the time she was enrolled in that program, Western's policy was that they had to pass all of the assessments for both areas when they are enrolled in dual certification programs. In her case, she was enrolled in a dual certification program for middle school math and middle school social studies. She had passed her PLT and her middle school math test, but not the social studies content assessment. Since that time, Western has changed their policy and will allow candidates to be recommended for one area and not necessarily have to pass all tests to get both areas. So her test scores had expired in 2018. They're still within the 10-year reporting period that ETS allows. So they are requesting the board to waive the 5-year requirement to allow her to be certified in middle school math.
I make a motion that we approve waiver G.
I second.
Right. Any further discussion or questions? All right. If you approve the motion to approve waiver G, request to waive 5-year test recency requirements for Stephanie Miller, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. All right. Waiver H.
Waiver H is also requested by Western Kentucky University on behalf of Caitlin McFarlane. This one is similar to the first 6010 regulation. Miss McFarlane had pursued elementary certification. She had passed all of the parts of her elementary test and her PLT with the exception of the elementary social studies test. She finally passed that in spring of 2021, only to find out that the rest of her test had expired in 2020. So Western is requesting the 5-year test recency for her to be certified in elementary.
I make a motion to approve waiver 8. Are we on H, G?
H.
H, yep. Waiver H for Caitlin McFarling.
I second the motion.
All right, any further discussion or questions? All right, if you approve the motion to approve waiver H, request to waive 5-year test recency requirements for Caitlin McFarling, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. All right. Waiver I.
Waiver I is our final waiver request of 6010. This one is requested by Brenda Thomas. She completed a program in an advanced program in learning behavior disorders at Campbellsville in 2015. She was recommended at the time for rank change only. She had test scores on file. However, the recommendation for LBD certification was left off her recommendation. It didn't occur to her at that time because she wasn't teaching in that area. Now that she is looking at a position in LBD, she noticed that the certification was not on her certificate. We have since received an amended recommendation page from the university. However, her test score for LBD expired in 2020.
I'll make a motion to approve waiver I.
I second the motion.
All right, any further questions or discussion? All right, if you approve the motion to approve waiver I to waive the 5-year recency requirement for Brenda Thomas, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, no. All right, waiver J.
And the final waiver is a waiver request of 8010, the request for rank 1. This is requested by, by Miss Laura Kurt. She is a secondary math teacher, and she has been asked by her district this year to teach personal finance that will meet the new graduation requirements for financial literacy. Secondary math teachers are able to teach. There's a couple classes of that personal finance that are in their permissions to teach. She has a background. She actually has 24 credit hours towards an MBA degree that she did not finish, with a lot of that MBA coursework in finance. She has decided, and she actually has enrolled in a program to add the business education certification through the proficiency route at University of the Cumberlands. And I did include that with the documentation. However, she's not going to be finished with that program until December, and she wants to be eligible for the rank 1 by the September 15th deadline for rank change. So she gets her pay raise for the current school year. So she is asking the coursework, or asking the board to allow her MBA coursework to be counted towards her rank 1 requirement prior to her finishing the business education program, because it directly relates to the personal finance course she is teaching this year.
Any questions for Crystal on this?
I make a motion to approve waiver J.
I second the motion.
All right, any further questions or discussion? All right, if you approve the motion to approve waiver J, request to allow Master of Business Administration coursework for rank 1 for Laura Kirk, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. All right, then the motion carries. Hearing no further discussion, at this time, the waiver committee is adjourned.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.